All right. So, this week's easier. Last week was God, and who knows about God? I mean, it's kind of groping in the dark. This is about man, human beings. So at least there we've got a bit more to go on. And a key dilemma that has troubled thinkers since ancient times regarding free will. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin by looking at why free will matters. We're then going to present the problems, the dilemmas that surround it, and then we're going to look at a couple of responses. But by the end, what we may end up doing is showing that we don't really understand what free will is anyway. Mm-hmm. So as a result, the whole thing's a mystery. And I should tell you, that is not only a conclusion you find in Jewish philosophy, going back, but in a very recent book by an extremely highly thought of academic philosopher who wrote an entire book on free will, and the end, his conclusion is, that's so this is a well-attested view, but let's see how far we go. So we're going to begin today with a couple of Ma'amrei Chazal, because they kind of give us a couple of views just out there stated, and then we can look at, all right, so that's all well and good. What's the kind of philosophical interpretation behind them? Yeah, and the first one, very famous, Amar Rabbi Chanina, it was from Brachot, from the Bavli, right? Amar Rabbi Chanina, Hakol b'yedei Shamayim chutz miyirat Shamayim, right? Very, very famous, that everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven. And then he quotes the pasuk for kind of his source, V'ata Yisrael, Ma Hashem lokech Hashem me'amach ki im me'amcha, ki im liyira. Okay, so, what does God ask of you other than fear? Right? So point being that the one thing they ask of you is fear of God, right? The rest of the stuff is kind of just set. So think about the kind of modern scientific view that everything is cause and effect, right? It's cause and effect, everything runs in accordance with cause and effect, but the one exception is, one hopes, human choice, right? And fear of heaven, obviously, they don't have fear of heaven. This doesn't have fear of... We have fear of heaven, right? So what is the usual way this is taken? It's taken, say, yes, as human beings, right? It is up to us how we conduct ourselves and the extent to which we conduct ourselves in a way that evinces fear of heaven. But yeah, there is certainly a causal network for the world, and that's very important. Without it, we wouldn't be able to do a thing, right? Without causation, if causation were not true, we could not rely on the fact that we would sit here and not suddenly levitate, maybe, or not, and it would be random according to who you are, because there ain't no causation, right? So causation is really important, and it's acknowledged as such. But accepting human choice, right? That's usually how this is, seen. And that, of course, is then problematized by at least two issues, right? And the first one is the famous Mishnah in Ahavat, which is Hakol Safoi v'harashot Nutana, which is, the important bit. Everything is foreseen, but free will is granted, right? And that, on the one hand, is a very nice statement of faith, right? That, so to speak, everything is known by God, and yet we have free will. And on the other hand, it's a problem, because how's that possible, right? And to make it very simple, concrete example, you're all here tonight. You all believe that you came here of your own free will. You could have said, nah, not going to bother. But you chose, foolishly, to come and listen to this. So, if God knew from all eternity that on February the 15th at 8:25, 2023, you would be sat here, it had to happen, right? God doesn't make mistakes. So if God has known since the beginning of time, since time immemorial, that you were going to be here now, however you thought about it until, I want to... nothing else could have been true at this moment in time than you sitting around this table, right? And if so, then that seems to be a bit of an issue. If we believe, and most people do, and this is the thing that I might have to disabuse you of later, but anyway, for the moment, the intuitive idea about free will is that we have before us, there's this lovely image from the kind of author Borges, a garden of forking paths, right? That you had alternate possibilities. You could have decided to come, you could have decided not to, you decided to come, but you're free because you could have done something else. That's how we, intuitively, I think, that's how we all think of free will. Yeah, I could have done something else, right? Problem is, like I say, God knew you were going to be here tonight, has always known that. You could not have done, however you might have felt about it inside, you could not have been anywhere else than where you are right now if God has foreknowledge of such things. That is the problem as posed, right? Okay, which I assume is pretty clear, right? And yet, Mishnah and Ahavat, right, want to kind of, what is it? Eat their cake and have it. By saying, no, it's all foreseen, and still there is free will. And the question is, how? Right? Is there a way to reconcile these two? Yeah? And final kind of introductory piece is that it seems to really matter, right? And particularly to us as Orthodox Jews who believe there is a certain way of life that we are commanded to observe. There are mitzvot, and we assume it is up to us whether or not we observe them. And as a result of that, there's some kind of either reward or punishment, right? Because quite frankly, if we're not free, none of that makes any sense. And that is why Chasdai Kreskas, who we haven't yet looked at, but Chasdai Kreskas is kind of the last of the really great medieval Jewish philosophers, probably. He had a Talmud, Yosef Albo, who's also significant, but probably less original in his thought. Some dispute that, and he's making a bit of a comeback, is Albo. From the 1500s, it's been a while, but he's making a bit of a comeback. But Chasdai Kreskas, who wrote this work, Or Hashem, which is his philosophical work, and he lived in the kind of end of the 14th century, into the 15th, and was kind of a very, very influential rabbi and even political leader, Jewishly speaking, in Spain at the time, was responsible for sort of rebuilding the Jewish community after the riots in 1391 and persecutions, really, really significant. He writes his work, Or Hashem, which was supposed to be part one of a two-part work. This is his work in philosophy, specifically written as a critique of Rambam's philosophy, right? So he was very specifically anti-Aristotelian and has, within the book, addresses all kinds of issues in the Rambam with which he disagrees. And he was going to write a second work, which was going to be a halachic work that was also a critique of the Rambam. And it was going to be, the issues he had with the Mishneh Torah, right? He either never wrote it or it got lost and we don't have it. I think it's actually that he never wrote it. Either way. So Kreskas, very, very significant, very important. And he states here in, this is part 2, book 5, introduction, where he establishes one of his principles of faith, which is bechira, free choice. And he states it right here in number 3, bechira, right? We're choosing here. Choice is one of these principles. Lefi shekvar kadam lanu, shemisodot hadat hiabchira. Right? It's one of the principal foundations of faith, as we have already established, says he. Right? And why? Because everybody has the kind of the ability, right? The free choice, if you might say. Because without it, the term commandment doesn't really make any sense if you are compelled to do whatever it is you're going to do, right? So the idea of a commandment, the idea that I can hold you responsible, say you ought to act a certain way, only makes sense to us because we think we have the ability to do so. If I said to you, right, you all have to levitate now, and if you don't, you're going to jail. You would all say, that's ridiculous, right? Because it's not possible. We have no choice in the matter. You can't make reward and punishment dependent on things that are impossible, right? You have to be able to do, and, we've been given mitzvot. Presumably, it's because we choose to do them, right, that we deserve some kind of praise or reward for doing so, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense to say, oh, great, you're amazing, if you were clockwork and you've been wound up to do it and it wasn't your choice, right? So the fact is, and he goes on, and we'll come back to that, right? It has to be that you have the ability, the bechira, to go, to any one of the different, we'll call it sides. I'm going to not do possibilities here, let's go literal. Because then the idea of a commandment makes sense, right? And the truth is, as human beings, the idea of value depends on free will, right? You don't have to necessarily bring Judaism into the equation. It's particularly relevant, right, for us. But just in a court of law, right, if somebody has a defense whereby I was hypnotized, it wasn't me, and you could prove it, then yeah, you'd say, okay, yeah, you know what, it wasn't their fault, it was the hypnotist who was controlling whatever it might be, right? As in, praise and blame, reward and punishment make sense because you chose to do it. So free will really matters, and that's why it is one of the Yesodot according to Kreskas, right? I assume that's all pretty, straightforward, basic. Rambam, I've just brought here Mishneh Torah, where he says something similar, maybe. So this is from Hilchot Shuvah, right? Law of Friends, chapter 5. Reshut kol, and the whole chapter is kind of on this issue. Again, Reshut kol adam nutana lo. Imrat sala tot hatzmo l'derech tova v'liot sadik hareshut biyado. Imrat sala tot hatzmo l'derech ra'a v'liot rasha hareshut biyado. Right? So he says, right? Everybody has this ability such that if they want to direct themselves to the good path and be a tzaddik, be a good person, they can do so. And if they the other path, then they can do so, right? You have the ability to go either way. As it says in the Torah, right? And it bases it there on Bereshit, right? We want to be like gods, or actually there, God actually means more like judges, but anyway, to be good or bad, right? Klomar hen min zeh shel adam ha'achad ba'olam, ve'ein lo min sheni domeh lo b'zeh ha'inyan, sheyehehu ma'atzmo b'dato machshavto yodeh ha'tov v'ravav v'aseh kol ma shehu chafetz. Right? That, right? We as human beings are the one species in the our world that have knowledge of good and bad and can choose to go either way in accordance with our choices. All right, so this is all pretty basic. Free will really matters, and nonetheless, though we have that, God also knows what we're going to do, and the problem is it's not clear how both of those can be true, right? Okay, yeah.
Has anyone commented on how the Rambam, the pasuk he quotes is after they sin? I mean, how did they sin in the first place if they didn't have free will?
How would they sin in the first? Yeah, so they
have free will.
There is this.
The pasuk he quotes for the source of them having free will is the response to them already sinning.
Correct. Yeah. So that's.
I think they had free will. They had the free will either to eat or not to eat.
I'm just saying that according to the Rambam, at least the way we understood the Rambam was that they sinned, and then Hashem responds, now that they sinned to Eid Eitzadat, they have free will and Yodeh Tovara. So it seems like it's a product of the Eitzadat and not...
Right, yeah. It's going to get complicated getting into that because of the Rambam's own interpretation of that particular story, right? But it's not clear that they... Put it like this, for the Rambam prior to this moment, they weren't interested in good and bad. They were interested in truth and falsity, right? Which is a very different thing, yeah? And as a result of the temptation of doing whatever they did, right, they therefore descend to a level where suddenly they're into all this good and bad stuff. So in effect for him, prior to the sin, yeah, they weren't concerned with societal matters at all. They were just like, philosophers sitting there contemplating eternal truths, and life was blissful. But it doesn't mean they didn't have free will, because the fact that they then did, right, so that doesn't rule out free will in advance, has it, right? Yeah? But yeah, his reading of that it's the second chapter of the guide, is a matter of, some debate, yeah? But the bit I've told you is the pretty straightforward stuff that he does say, yeah, Michael?
I'm trying to kind of reconcile these two things.
Yeah.
And I will try to say the following. First of all, we're talking about time, right?
Yes,
but
yes,
there are
yes,
objects even in this world that have no time.
Yeah.
For example, photon, light,
Yeah.
has no time because it's moving with the speed of light. Right?
Yeah.
Now, we are saying in the four letter Hashem's name that he was, is, and will be.
Yeah.
Meaning he exists simultaneously
Yeah.
at all the states, right?
Yeah.
So if he exists in the past, exists in current, and the future. So it's not that he pushes us to do something, but being in the future already, he just knows.
Right.
And that's it. So there is
Right. This is one of the solutions. I hate to say it, I don't think it's a very good one, right? And I will explain why.
Okay.
But it is definitely, it's one of them that is suggested. And Sadhya Gaon, actually, who we've got here, gives exactly that solution. And Chaste Kreskas himself suggests it as an option, right? So you're in very good company in terms of that solution. We'll explore whether or not it works, right? But it is a possible solution, and we'll look at it. For the sake of time, number 5 is simply the other challenge. And we won't do it inside, but there are 2 challenges to free will, right? There's the God challenge, right? Divine foreknowledge. But in the modern era, people who don't believe in God are very worried about free will because of the advances in modern science, whereby causation, right? Everything is a result of a prior cause, which itself is the result of a prior cause, right?
Not a very modern thought of or Hashem has it.
Oh no, absolutely. He puts it in terms of Aristotelian
Right.
science, but exactly, it was something that they were also concerned with, right? But it seems to have come to kind of, I suppose, mass consciousness more recently, right? So it's something now because it's out there in the news and all, right? People are always talking about neuroscience, and we now know that all right, that effectively everything is just cause and effect, and similarly, therefore, we aren't really free because we don't have a choice because everything is determined by the prior causation, right? So it's 2 different levels of challenge, right? One is related specifically to the kind of view that people usually have of God, and one is related to a kind of quasi-scientific challenge, given the increased belief / evidence for determinism, right, within at least the physical realm. Okay? All right, so those are 2 different problems. All right? And the reason I introduced the second one is precisely because of Sadhya Gaon, and actually it relates to one thing you said, Michael, but not the main thing. So have a look at Sadhya Gaon. Right? Sadhya Gaon is sort of, seen as the godfather of medieval Jewish philosophy. He wrote his book, Eminot V'Deot, Book of Beliefs and Opinions, also in Arabic, right, which is why it's just the English translation here. And he's writing at the beginning of the 10th century, right? So he's kind of the earliest who wrote a full kind of system of theology / philosophy that has survived and became important enough that it was preserved and translated way back into Hebrew very, very early on by Shmuel ibn Tabon's father. And he says the following, right? So he first presents the challenge. Have a look here at number 6. Furthermore, one might perhaps also say, inasmuch as God knows what is to be before it happens, he must also know that man will rebel against him. But in that case, it would be impossible for man not to rebel, since otherwise what God foreknows would not be realized. Right? Okay, so it's basically our problem, right? If you know he's going to sin, then, well, he's going to have to sin. God can't get things wrong, right? It's exactly our problem. His solution is as follows. The resolution of this doubt, however, is more obvious than even that of the first one. He's talked about other doubts before. It need not be pointed out that the person who makes the above-mentioned assertion is really unable to prove that the Creator's foreknowledge of things is the cause of their coming into being. His assertion is therefore nothing else than an erroneous assumption or deliberate invention. Right, so what is Sadhya's solution? He's saying, fine, God knows. But his knowledge isn't the cause of what they do. It's not making them do it, right? I now know something with absolute certainty that is where you have no ability to do anything else, which is that you're sitting here right now, right? The present, we all have that knowledge. We all have knowledge of the present, and the present is something that can't change. I know it, but I'm not making you sit here, right? It's not my knowledge doesn't make you do it, and he's saying the same. He's saying, look, there's not a problem here. Right, because exactly, but you know that because we can see it. Oh, don't worry. But yeah, so he's saying, no, this isn't a problem. God's knowledge doesn't cause you to do what you're doing.
That's what.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's saying. Is this a good solution?
So the Orsameach says it's not.
I'm glad he says that, because I think that too.
I looked at I don't remember, I didn't understand at the time exactly why, but he has practical reasons.
No, there are reasons that so,
Can I offer maybe an idea why it might be a fair solution?
It might be a good solution.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I know it's not popular because I think the assumption why it's not a good solution is that God knew it was going to happen beforehand. That means it was already going to happen, which means circular. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's assuming though that when we speak of God knowing something beforehand, we're actually dealing with a relative time. Which I don't think makes sense when compared to God.
That's another solution. Correct. Yeah, and I thought that was kind of what one of the things Michael was saying too, kind of a similar type of solution. But 100, and we'll come to that one, right?
The last year you mentioned, Milah Meshutefet, Yodea, we know it's different things. It's not like
also true.
That's what the Rambam was going to say.
Yeah, that's the Rambam's view, which I haven't brought because it's a straightforward one that we can just state, which is he says knowledge and knowledge, two different things completely, as we saw last week. Yeah. So right now that is different.
That means that when it happened, it did happen, but also will happen, and also
right. Yeah, and we'll come to that one. Right. Okay. So we've actually now got 3 solutions on the table, right? One, Rambam's solution, right? Which is, look, you say God knows, but we don't know what knows means when it applies to God, and therefore we don't know what we're dealing with. You can't even generate the problem.
You cannot take God into your own logic.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one solution, right? One that has come in for quite a lot of criticism, right? In its day, right? The Ravid himself also did not like that solution.
But on practical grounds, so not philosophical ones.
Yeah. In terms of it opens up Pandora's box. Absolutely.
You open a question, which is the answer.
Well, he's saying it's not really an answer. That's what he's kind of saying, which is.
I think I have to check again, but what I understood was he was against it on practical grounds. Like you talk about things you don't really understand, which is exactly what I'm saying. And that's not saying people who want to understand.
No, he's worried that it will open people up to because exactly as you're saying.
But that's a practical problem.
Don't open up the question if you can't give a proper answer.
Right, but I think that's I understood it to be a practical problem, not a philosophical one.
All right, maybe. So that's solution 1, right? Solution 2, which is that, and you tell me if this is actually kind of, I'm rephrasing it, but we say the problem is God knew beforehand what you were going to do, and that's a problem. But of course, if God is not in time, he didn't know anything beforehand, right? Time doesn't apply to God. Time is something that, applies to us. If God has, so to speak, the whole of human history laid out by order like that, then he's not before or after. Those terms don't apply, so God didn't know beforehand. It's not a problem, is that?
Yeah.
Right, fine. Solution number 2. Solution number 3, Sadhya's, right? Which is, well, the knowledge isn't making it happen. All right, so we'll go in reverse order. Sadhya's solution. All right, here's why I don't think it works. Right, and actually there are two reasons that I don't think it works, and these aren't unique to me in any way. So, the first one is that imagine that, well, let's start in the following. Imagine causation wasn't true, right? Imagine it wasn't cause and effect and somehow we were completely, uncaused in what we did, right? If the world were like that, would God still know what you were going to do? I mean, I assume he would, right? God doesn't know what we're going to do because he's watching and guessing, oh, is that going to cause that, right? He knows because he's God, and it's not to do with him having to trace work it out, right? So God will know regardless. And in that case, right, it would be absolutely true not only that he's not causing, there is no cause, right? But God will still know. And if God knows, it's true. And if it's true, it doesn't really matter whether he's making you or not. You were going to be here tonight regardless because it was true 100 years ago that you were going to be here, and that's just an arbitrary number I'm choosing. And that means, again, so whatever you thought, you had to be here. Doesn't really matter. What Sadhya's doing here is confusing two different questions, right? The God question and the causation question. They are both genuine questions, right? Sadhya clearly thinks causation's a problem. Right? Because he tries to say, it's okay, God's not making it and not causing it, which means, if he was, we're in trouble. So he clearly actually does think causation would be a problem. But it's okay, God's not causing us. And that might be true. But how does that change anything? You still had no other possibility than sitting here right now tonight if God knew about it. Forget causation doesn't matter here. It's a different question. So Sadhya here, it seems, is conflating the two different questions into one, and they're not. They're two different questions. Okay? Is that clear? Right? Do we follow why this doesn't necessarily work? And this is something that, for example, Ralbag would go with. We're going to see him in a minute. He's really interesting.
So I would argue this on two grounds.
I
would argue this on two grounds.
Yeah.
The first one is the moral grounds. That again, what the Kraska said before, that the free will is the foundation of being commanded.
Yeah.
Right? It makes no difference whether God knows or not. The difference is if I think that I made this choice, then I'm held responsible for it. Because to me, I didn't.
That might be true, but if you think you're free, that we all think we're free, we might not be.
No,
right?
that's the thing. So first of all, in practical plane, I don't think it makes a difference. Because even if in some abstract philosophical sense, God knew that I was going to be here, and therefore I had no choice. Yeah. But as long, again, on the practical plane, Rausayago's answer is true, because as long as I didn't know that, so therefore I did have a choice, and I did have a choice to make.
No, you just thought you did.
But that's the same thing. That's exactly the same thing.
So that's where people would dispute. Is that really the same thing?
Again, from a person's point of view, it is the same thing.
Oh, it is.
You have to be very verified philosopher to think otherwise.
No, I think you just need to kind of pull back and look and see, well, actually, no. I mean, we could say that about, you would think that if you were hypnotized, right? If you'd genuinely been hypnotized into doing stuff, you would still think you were doing it yourself, but you're not.
Right. No, but that's, again, that's the, this is the famous dispute, I think, between Simon Johnson and Bishop Berkeley. Right, when he said that people, things aren't real, he said But that's a practical reason. From a philosophical point of view, I still don't understand why, if God knows something is true, it means I have to do this. I don't have to do this, I'm just doing it.
Okay, but you knew you were, and it means, that's important, right? Because this comes back to our definition of free will, and we'll return to it, okay? All right? But again, if our intuitive definition of free will is I could have done otherwise, then this rules out that freedom, because you could not have done otherwise. Right? That's the key.
Does it matter though? Like, if
that's a good question.
If I wasn't here and I was playing tennis, which is what I usually do on Wednesday night. Then would it have mattered for this class or not in this room? You would have given your.
Oh, of course, absolutely. But for you,
for me, it would have mattered, right? But it's all mundane little things.
Right.
But the big things is what God could control and push us in the direction.
So here we would disagree, because we would say that your mitzvahs have cosmic importance. and you being here is affecting the world and the way that you don't understand.
But God's plan can still go on whether I play tennis or
It will go
here.
on. So
It wouldn't have mattered in the grand scheme of things. So I'm saying like the mundane things, we have the free will to do what we want to do, but the big picture, God's going to control what He wants to control. So both are true.
Right. So there are people who have that view. Right. It's not clear how easy it is to actually maintain. Right, just in terms of, ultimately God is still, therefore, kind of the super manager of human affairs, to go back to a Leibovitz term, right? Where he's like, does this matter or not? This one doesn't, all right, I'll let you, but then you're not really free because he wouldn't have done if it did matter. You know what I mean? It's still kind of a very, so it's more passive, but it's still problematic.
We do have free will to do certain things, but if it was a big thing, we would be steered to do what God wants us to do, so He's going to know what we're going to do, and it's going to matter.
Right, maybe, but the problem is with foreknowledge, if God literally knows everything, then in all of these cases, you don't actually couldn't do anything else, right?
In this reality,
so we'll come back to this reality and the time thing, but that's Sadhya number 1, right? Rambam number 2, knowledge. We'll come back to that once we've looked at this one, right? Ralbag, and we'll also come back to the timeless thing because it all sort of comes together. Now, Ralbag, Rabbi Levi ben Gershom, lived 1288 to 1344. Wrote Milchamot Hashem, Wars of the Lord, very, very influential book, and the first really significant one to be written in Hebrew, right, as was Kreskas, but he comes later. And if there's one thing you will never forget from tonight, right, you might forget every single thing I say, but you'll never forget Ralbag has a crater on the moon named after him, right? This is true. Rabbi Levi, it is called, because he was a great astronomer and he created an instrument that measured distance between planets called Jacob's staff, Mate Yaakov, I think, and is recognized in the sciences and actually has a crater on the moon named after him. There you go. Great factoid. There was value to coming tonight. There is one thing that you will have learned that you won't forget. Okay. And on this matter, he's actually has a very controversial view, but a very interesting one. Because, and again, given the time and given the technical language, maybe we'll do this outside. He basically, I think so you've got it there, both in Hebrew and in translation. But let me give you the view. He believes the following. He says, look, there are certain ways in which everything in the world is indeed ordered causally. Right? Now, he happened to believe, and this was, for its day, this was science, in not just astronomy, but astrology, right? As in, if you were born when Venus was in the ascendant, and I'm just making this up, I honestly don't know what that means, or if it's even a correct term, but you know what I mean, right? You will have this temperament, you'll be the kind of person who will do this, and will be causally determined, right? He does believe that. And he does believe most of our actions, therefore, are causally determined by astral determinants. But he also absolutely believes human beings are the creatures with the ability to overcome that, right? Which, again, in terms of the way people talk about modern views on this stuff, people have different inclinations, right?
This is what the Gemara says.
Right, you're more inclined to something, but you've got the power to, right?
Person is going to bloodshed, he'll be a shortcut or more,
right.
or
right, exactly. How you channel it, whatever ways to, deal with the stronger inclinations you have, and that's your challenge, but you have the ability, right? It's a very kind of well-attested view, right? Yeah, so that's Ralbag believes that, right? So, yes, causal determinism, but we have the ability to override. He thinks, on the whole, we don't override, right? So you, all of you, right, let's say, you were somehow constituted, like me, with this sad, pathetic interest in philosophy, and decide that that's what I want to do with myself on a Wednesday night, and you turn up here, because that's the kind of people you are, right? As opposed to somebody who hates it and says, but no, I'm going to, right? So most of our actions, according to Rynhold, are determined, right? But not in a bad way. It's just, we are who we are. But we do have the ability, right? That he believes. God knows, right? What God knows, therefore, is all those general rules, right? So God knows, for example, that somebody born on March 1st, 1971, right, is the kind of person who is definitely going to end up as a philosophy professor, right? What he doesn't know is that I'm here, I was born then, and I am, right? As in, he knows the infinite possibilities dictated by the laws that govern our world. Right? So if you think of all the forking paths, right, he knows all of those. What he doesn't know is which one's actually going on. Because what he doesn't know are the results of human free choice. So every choice that we make, he knows them, and he knows them perfectly. Why? Well, if free choice is genuine, and I genuinely have the choice to do A or B, then the perfect knowledge of them is to know, could do A or B, right? But not know which. And according to Rynhold, that is the case. So, like I say, it's a controversial view. It's not a mainstream view.
Would probably say this is heresy.
Sorry, the Rambam
Probably would say it's heresy.
might do. So people after the Rynhold did. Right?
They called this heretical.
Yeah, they did, yeah. There were people who didn't like the bar. He still got in the Mikrot a lot, so,
Not with this stuff.
Well, that's the thing. What's really interesting is his biblical commentary is completely consistent with this, and he doesn't hide away from this.
I was going to say, isn't this more consistent with the reading of Tanakh?
It depends which psukim. You can find psukim that say that and find psukim that imply, no, he actually knows what's going on and all that, yeah. So it's kind of, that's not, there's no kind of strong...
Was he
The idea of God knowing everything isn't necessarily, that's like, is that...
Yeah. But just so we know, so we understand, the view is, and actually in a way is quite contemporary, right? All this multiverse stuff is very popular, right?
No, it's simulation. You're on a simulation.
Right, but the multiverse now, all the movies, they're in it. I got actually reminds me of the story, but we haven't got time. So, I'll tell you afterwards, it's cute. So, this is Rynhold, right? God knows every possibility since the beginning of time, right? But he doesn't know. So the whole problem of foreknowledge, the way the Rynhold gets rid of it is by saying, God doesn't have foreknowledge. Right? As in, he thinks this is a real problem, and there is no way out but to either deny free will or to deny foreknowledge. He denies foreknowledge.
Was he the first one to say this?
I think he's the first we know of who's a mainstream, one of the Rishonim and a significant figure who is in all our texts.
And those who came after him didn't thought this was...
A lot of people didn't like it. Yeah. Now, I will say in his defense, why is it such a... there are two different things here. Okay, the Rynhold's actual view is that he doesn't know any, as he puts it, particulars. Right? So it's not he doesn't know free choice, he literally doesn't know you're sitting here now. Right? That's Rynhold. But for our purposes, we don't need to go that far to use his solution to this problem. Right? So, forget Rynhold's general view that God doesn't know anything about this world. Right, which is his view.
That is heretical.
So again, people thought it was, but this is where you get kind of, heated debates, to put it mildly. But forget that. Let's go with, he does. He just doesn't know what we're going to do next. Right, which is ultimately the free will problem, is to confine it to that. And then...
But then he finds out.
Of course he does, yes. He does find out.
How does it apply?
Again, so that's where you get the timeless bit that might help with that, but it doesn't really. Here's, though, right, why is this? Why does he believe this? right? That God doesn't know the future. And we'll just, for our purposes, we'll reduce it to that to minimize the radicalism, right?
Which future?
Sorry?
It's which future, not the future, but
Yes.
which future.
Yeah, correct.
No.
Correct. Which one? Yeah. Now, one thing in his defense, does it matter? Like, what people are worried about is God's providence, his ability to guide the world. As long as he knows what's going on, right, he can stop anything. They need to know what's going to happen next? Not necessarily. I'm not sure it matters that much. Yeah, exactly. He'll correct for it, or whatever it might
That's
be.
why we
Yeah.
do have a free will,
Right.
as long as it's in accordance to some big plan.
Right. So that's in terms of the radicalism of the view. You can minimise it, though. Rynhold was more radical than what I'm.
So how does it work with the idea of Hashgacha Pratis then?
How does it work with?
How does this work with the idea of Hashgacha Pratis?
He has, and this is true of Rynhold and Rambam, they are at least consistent. They have very non-mainstream views of those things too. They believe in them,
Of what?
but very non-stream of Hashgacha, right? Hashgacha Pratis in particular, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this could be okay. Hashgacha Pratis.
Yeah, correct. Because you've got
rules,
you've got that.
But
Not
you believe in
Hashgacha
Hashgacha Pratis
Pratis.
also.
He has a version of Hashgacha Pratis, but it is again, and his view of Hashgacha Pratis is the same as the Rambam's, by the way. Rambam doesn't have this view of knowledge, but they do share the same view of Hashgacha Pratis, so it's interesting.
Like a Sechel HaPoel.
That sort of thing, yeah. But anyway, the main thing here, right? And then I'll give you this piece, and then I'll come straight to you, Michael. The reason for this is actually very interesting and almost independent of God, right? Because let's work with the following, all right? So some of you were here last week, all right? And I want you to think back. If I had said last week, right, this time next week, you will be sat at this table, right? Now, we know that's now true, right? When I said it, was it already true? Or does it only become true when it happens, right? As in, if I make a statement about the future, so I'm going to say now, right, you'll all be here next week, right? Now, that might turn out to be true, it might turn out to be false, yeah? At the moment, we don't know. But forget what we know. Right now, is it true or false, or is it neither? And it will become true or false in a week's time, right? That is a question in logic, right? Logicians and Aristotle spoke about this question. Statements about the future, do they have a truth value? That's how we put it. Okay?
So according to Rynhold, they don't, and according to Rambam, everybody else they do.
Correct. And if they don't, then it's not impugning God, right? God cannot create a square circle, according to the vast majority of religious thinkers. He can do everything that is doable, but he can't do the impossible, the literal impossible. Can he make pigs fly? Yeah, because that's possible. But he can't make a square circle, because that's a contradiction in terms, right? And I say almost everybody is perfectly happy to accept that. God is omnipotent because he can do everything that can be done. According to Rynhold, God is omniscient. He knows everything that can be known. But the whole point is the future can't be. It's not knowable, the same way a square circle is not possible. Therefore, and he does say this in here, I know you're all going to say that means God isn't perfect. He says, no, he knows everything that can be known.
So what about the Aristotelian problem that additional knowledge means a change and God's unchangeable?
Well, again, for the Rynhold, it's not a problem because he doesn't know this stuff anyway, right? But that's when we get to the time.
Well, that's why he has to say that.
Right,
But
right.
that itself is very
But let's get to the time thing, right? So, Michael, you had a question. Let's come to that first, and then we'll do the time bit.
Again, I'm trying to be a good boy, and I'm trying to reconcile everything. And the way it looks to me, not my idea, but I read in a book of one of Jewish Russian physicists the following idea. Okay, just because real knowledge, right? Hashgacha Pratis, it's related not to a person, it's big numbers. Otherwise, you wouldn't have prophets. When it says you will be back in Israel, it doesn't say about particular person, right? It says about Israel.
Right.
So God, now experiment from this book. There is a thing called double slit experiment, and just very simple in physics. So
oh yes, quantum. Yeah.
in quantum
Another one.
mechanics,
Yeah.
So the idea is the following: you send particles, electrons, photons, and between your gun and the screen, there are two slits, right?
Yeah.
So if you do it one by one, it doesn't have to be in all of them one by one. Eventually, after a certain time, you will see diffraction pattern, interference pattern, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
now, what happens is, you know 100%. If you know the condition where the particles go, you know for sure you could calculate and tell me exactly the radius of the,
Yeah.
But I don't know where
Each one is
particle
going.
goes.
Yeah.
So this is the whole idea. Again, unfortunately, it's not mine.
Yeah,
But
I'm aware of it,
absolutely
yeah.
agree with this.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we, and Shkafa practice is not related to one person.
Okay.
And that's why we, as individuals, we could talk, ask Hashem about something. Because for us, it's not predetermined.
Okay.
It is predetermined that we are going back to Israel,
Fine.
many things. But here, we are free.
Okay. So that, but in which
And I believe
case?
somewhere it says that Hashem controls streams of what. It
Right.
doesn't say
For each
drop.
person. Fine, okay. So if that's the case, though, then the roll bug ceases to be controversial.
That's not a local purchase. That's
No,
not a problem.
no,
Right.
it's just that.
No, because he would say, I don't know what each individual is going to do. No?
For one person.
Okay.
But we know.
That's not a local purchase.
But
No, it's not.
But he knows about
The general
what is-
patterns or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. But that would make you kind of pretty much like the roll bug.
And what's
Right?
wrong
Yeah, I
with
know
it?
general patterns. I've no idea what anyone's
But
going to
it's
do. but-
because it's,
Right.
it's just
No, but
What?
what-
What's wrong?
It's not what we got
what is
from
wrong
our
with this
race.
picture?
Yeah.
What is
Who
wrong?
said that drivers
with the
are-
roads?
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
fine.
Everything,
Fine.
and
Yeah.
then
It's not-
we are
this
free.
is-
No,
There
sure,
is a
but
reason.
then
And
that's
the kind of,
but then that's
so-
roll
no,
bug,
it's against the tradition.
right? Then that's roll bug.
There is a reason why it's
Messiah
controversial.
coming, whether we're all righteous or all wicked, either one could happen.
Right, but it'll be-
Messiah's
yeah.
gonna
Yeah,
come.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
God laid out
yeah,
some
yeah.
possibilities.
Yeah.
And how you get there
Yeah.
are your choice.
Yeah. So, but right now, so here's the thing. The other solution is the timeless God, right? God doesn't know in advance. We had that one. Or the Rambam, knowledge. So, two things. Number one, let's say God is timeless, right? Fine. Again, doesn't really make any difference to the key question, which is, what's going to happen next week? Is that true now or not? If it's true now, if it is true now, right, then it doesn't matter whether God knows it or not, it's going to happen anyway. As in, the problem is created by logic, right? We have something, God, which is a container for all that knowledge. But logicians worry about this. People who are secularists worry about this because they say, if a statement I make right now about the future is true right now, or false right now, it's going to be. God doesn't make a difference, right? So take God out of time, right? Doesn't really help. The problem is truth, right? And that leaves us in a quandary, right? Because it seems like either the future is, the story of the world is written, therefore I don't have a choice of alternate possibilities, or it's not written, in which case it's not knowable and no one can know it, including God, right? Rambam, the same thing. Knowledge, true. That's absolutely, there's no question that our knowledge, God's knowledge, not, just completely different species. But knowledge, the one thing that is true about knowledge, not about anyone's, is it has to be of the truth. You can't know falsehoods by definition. So again, if it's true, it doesn't help. Right? Now, all of this, therefore, is why you end up tied up in knots, and there are, different solutions to these problems. We've looked at, inside a couple, right, outside a couple. But here's the real thing, right? Our problem is generated by our view that free will is about being able to choose an alternative, right? Because we think, well, hang on, if I'm determined, I'm not free. If I cause and effect, I'm not free. So let's get rid of cause and effect, okay. But then what? Are my acts random? Right? If I have a choice of two possibilities, I could do this or I could jump on the table now and start singing, right? I'd be a lunatic, right? To do things without causation, which is the intuitive view of free will, actually that's not a valuable form of free will, right? If I 50-50 could go either way, or even if it's not, even if it's 90-10, there's still chance, and I could do the 10. What do you mean I could do the 10? I want to be the kind of person, thankfully I am the kind of person, if I walk into a candy store, right, and I want a bar of chocolate, and I put my hand on it, I've forgotten my wallet. I don't want to be the person who think, should I steal it? Right? I just walk out. And that's causal. That's because of who I am, I've been formed that way. And I certainly hope that that will cause me, without any kind of consideration of the alternative, to walk out the store. So why is alternate possibilities so valuable? It's not clear it is, right? That makes you random. The other form of free will that people talk about is it doesn't matter. You don't need alternate possibilities. You need to be able to do what you chose to do, right? And they give a thought experiment. Imagine you're in the voting booth. I want to make sure you vote for a certain candidate. So I'm monitoring your brain. And if I see you beginning to look like you're going to vote for the wrong candidate, right? So you can do nothing other. You have no alternate possibilities here. You're going to vote for the wrong, right? For my candidate. But if you walk in there and you vote for my candidate just because you wanted to, then you're free, right? But why? You had no alternate possibility. Why is freedom dependent on something that never happens, the other thing? Right?
So
and both forms of freedom.
It's a question of choice, and since you're making a choice.
It's a question of choice, correct. So that comes to what you were saying, right? Is it a question of I could have done something else? Or is freedom about doing the thing I chose to do, even if the thing I chose to do might be determined by my upbringing, As long as no one's got a gun to my head, you're not compelled by externals, and the problem is, both these views of freedom are problematic, right? We don't want to be completely caused, because then we think, I didn't have a choice. But we don't want to be completely arbitrary, because then we think we're lunatics. And this is the real question here, actually, right? And this is where we go back to Ahavat, right? We don't really know what free will is. You cannot define free will. We don't really understand. We think we do, but when you start to think about it, you don't really know what it is. And therefore, the idea that God knows and we're free, because I don't really know what free will is and what that would be ruling out. If it's ruling out alternate possibilities, it's not such a problem, because alternate possibilities ain't all that, right? They make you into an arbitrary being. So the real question here, the real mystery here, what exactly is free will?
So, just one question.
Yeah.
All these philosophers seem to argue from pure logic. But in the spirit of Rabbi Levi, let's argue from empirical experience.
Yeah.
So how would Rabbi Levi resolve this? I mean, I would suggest that he would say, well, empirically, I know I have free will because I have free will. I can do this or I can do that.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, he goes the Sadhya route on this. He's exactly the same as Sadhya got on. It's
right,
his solution.
But I'm saying, so that's exactly, but my point is, it's not in the realm of logic. He would argue, again, if we just kind of take what he said about the fact that the non-physical God speaks to physical beings, he would say that, okay, you're a philosopher and logic doesn't make sense to you, but that's okay, because it doesn't have to make sense. I know it empirically.
Look, he, in the same way as he said explicitly last week, God spoke to people. How? I have no idea. It's impossible, but it happened. And so free will, it's a mystery. I don't understand it, but we got it.
No, my point is, he would argue, again, in an empirical way, that we know we have free will because we have free will, and how it works with God, that makes no difference.
That's a little different. I don't think it works in the same way here. I do think it is true, right? Absolutely true, that we don't really know what free will is. Therefore, if God knows, does that rule out free will? Well, only if you're defining free will that way, and we can't define free will that way, so it's not a problem, right? So that's a different type of. That's arguing free will's a mystery, but rationally arguing that it's a mystery.
But
right?
I'm just trying to say that again, it's an empirical approach, right? Again, Dr. Samuel Johnson saying, I just feel this thus. If I feel it's real, everybody else feels real, then it's real.
And in this case, there's something to that, but only because there is a genuine mystery about what. If we knew for sure, right, what something is, then all the experiences of the world isn't going to disprove that.
No, you can content with
phenomenon. But still, but on this thing, the point is that really free will isn't what we think it is, right? Seems to really be the kind of the ultimate conclusion. And like I say, this philosopher wrote a whole book, and that was his conclusion. He said there is a brilliant argument that he cannot put holes in, right? That free will, determinism, they're incompatible with each other. And there's a brilliant argument to show that they're not incompatible with that, and I can't put holes in either, and ultimately free will is a complete mystery to us, right?
The question doesn't matter.
The question... the questions, it's helpful in terms, and again, it depends what your aim is, but in this case, what's helpful is teaching you that don't be quite so sanguine about defining free will, right? Because it's actually quite mysterious, and we all say, this is what it is. No, it isn't, right? And that, so, that's in a certain thing, could be.
Coming back to the Rabbi Halevi, right? This is what we started with Rav Chazal Kraskas, right? And this is what the Mishnah means, right?
Absolutely.
That's exactly what the Mishnah is trying to tell us. Mishnah is trying to tell us, even though, and I think, the Tanoim probably understood this conundrum.
No, but that's where the Mishnah ultimately is the best answer, right?
And they say that even though everything is foreseen, but the free will is given. But look at the continuation. That's not where it ends. It says
absolutely. It's a moral. It's about value.
And the goodness
and judgment.
Judged. Now the point is not that to say, like you said, okay, well, we don't know what it is and how they coexist. The point is that there's an outcome of this. That despite it was a problem, in the moral sense, you're still liable for actions.
Oh, right, okay, fine.
As opposed to, this thing, one thing I never understood in Calvinism, when they think everything's predetermined, and that's how we have to be good.
Right. No, but that doesn't follow anyway. That
I never really understood the logic in that, but
it doesn't really follow. But 100%, ultimately, this is where you have a genuine mystery at the heart of this that is very difficult to fathom.
So it's interesting, though, the Mishnah does not give you a resolution.
No, because there isn't one.
So perhaps that, so in other words, you're saying that the Tanoim were already at the end of our discussion.
Yeah, basically, no, that's the point. On this one, the Mishnah kind of actually, that's the best you can do. Yeah, that really is.
So it's almost like all the philosophy which came afterwards is explanation why they said that. Why they said that, and there's no
it's an interpretation of that ultimately leads to that place. Yeah, but
it's like we know we don't know, and the rest was just to show that we don't. That does happen.
Yeah, and we found out how we don't know. Though I say that, of course, that's me telling you this. Rynhold doesn't believe that. Husday Kreskas doesn't. They think they have certain solutions, but
very problematic.
Not so much.
I just have a question. So, just on the other side of the question, is determinism any more compelling? Because if we're just going to assume that, like, let's say logic is, like, infallible, and there's no holes in logic ever, and cause and effect is always consistent, then even if, like, you go back to that question of, okay, then who pushed the first thing? Or you go back to the question of, if it's just always infinitely been happening, that doesn't seem logically like a logic comprehensible solution to us as well either. What
solution is? What's the solution that's not comprehensible that you're saying?
If we're gonna say for determinism, right? If you're gonna say determinism, cause and effect always happens, it's kind of hard to say what's the first thing that caused something that didn't have a cause beforehand, right?
Yeah.
And if you were to, so that kind of goes down to determinism garbage, I would say, as an answer, as at least fitting within logic. And the other one would be if cause and effect is truth, and it's just always been happening in like a circle, right? This happened because this caused it, and this happened because
and so on and so forth. Eternally.
That's also, I feel like, something logically incomprehensible for us also.
That one less so. It's not logically incomprehensible. It's difficult for us. We don't like it, but it's not a logical contradiction. Right? Neither of them are logical contradictions, actually. They're uncomfortable.
See,
But why is the first one not a logical? Second one I can understand as being maybe logically sound, though I don't think it's comprehensible for like humans.
Yeah, we can't wrap our heads around it. Doesn't mean it's not.
Yeah. So I would say that. I mean,
Right.
I know there are other problems with saying that logic is
Yeah.
like the logic itself is flawed.
See,
But the first one, what's not problematic with that first?
Well,
concept?
we believe there's a first cause, so it can't be a
But
problem.
but I'm saying
An
within
uncaused cause. Yeah,
Within the view of determinism, it wouldn't be.
no, it could be.
But then what determined the determiner, the first cause?
He's in contingent
Don't
being,
need.
he's Mechuyev Metzius, and you always
Don't need to be.
Well,
You can
if-
have God
if-
as the first cause. No, that's what we.
So what's the difference for determinism in there being a God as a first cause and every other consequence being its own cause as well? Meaning, why do we have to follow the law of determinism by us, and not by God, if we can't just follow that same law by us as well, just like we do by God? I mean, you can have a first. We're saying determinism only doesn't apply by God, but it has to apply by us. Why does it have to apply by us any more than it didn't have to apply to God?
Because we are a different order of beings. That was that's like.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I understand exactly kind of the.
We're saying determinism. If determinism says that everything has a cause and effect, besides, let's say, the first cause, right?
Yes.
The first cause didn't need.
Yeah.
So that implies that the first cause had free will, right? Why do we need to say that only that if you already say
Because the first cause is of a different order of existence,
So you
as
have
Rabbi
to
Grunberg
say
says.
that
You have to
that's
say that.
perfect.
I mean, you have to say that just generally because
it's
it is the exception because it's the only thing that we accept doesn't need a cause, which makes it of a different order from anything that we ever know of.
So I'm saying,
Right?
would it be just an empirical argument then that we would not be able to have free will and like? I don't understand within the view of determinism why things have to have a cause and effect if God doesn't have to have a cause and effect.
Because he is a different again. Because
Yeah,
he's a different
different
kind
order
of
of
So that's
existence.
just you're saying that's only empirically.
It's
It's only a result of
It's
empirical
also
seeing.
logically.
We're in
It
a
has to be
different.
that way.
It's more than that. It's that because of the very strong evidence that kind of, science tries to evince for determinism, right? And it makes sense of all of this. And then they ask, okay, so, can that go on forever, infinitely, or does it have to have a first cause? People differ on that.
So this is, I guess,
Right.
more of a, I guess, what we call epistemological question. So here's a question like this. So again, Rabbi Halevi will come from experience, and experience shows me I have free will.
So I'd like to say, I don't think he would say that.
But he could make such an argument. We all think we all have free will. Well, hold on. The argument against it, that logic shows that that's not true, and therefore we all live in an illusion of free will.
Sorry, why it's not true?
Hold on.
Not getting it.
One second. Let's say logically, we would say that this is not true, and it's an illusion which we all experience. The problem is our logic is also based on our experience. So, in other words, both the proposition that I empirically know I have free will and the proposition that logic tells me I don't have free will, both come from my experience.
So I say two things
and
to that.
therefore neither one is really compelling.
So two things. Number one, I don't think that, this is kind of what we're saying, I don't think logic does show you don't have free will precisely because of what we said about free will.
If you take the deterministic view of it, let's say, like for example, the Ralbag, right, who's
if you
forced
take
by
the
logic to say that God
deterministic
doesn't.
view,
I mean, Ralbag says logically it has to be this way, and therefore he says what he says.
Yeah.
Mike, I would argue with Ralbag is that, okay, your logic comes from your senses, which is what it comes from.
So that you could question.
And
logic doesn't really come from our senses, it's a priori. No, it's the way we might be constrained as human beings to think, but it doesn't come from our senses. Because the things that we say as logical truths cannot be based on sense experience.
But that's what you could argue and
that's
say
a priori.
everything we say is based on sense experience.
So that's
Kant maybe
empiric.
say?
That's kind of what empiricists said. No, so that's exactly what Kant didn't say, because he realised there are things that we take as absolutely basic that you absolutely can't gain from sense experience. So they're kind of given a priori, kind of the structure of the human mind or whatever it might be. That's getting into very rarefied territory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
For-
we should let everybody go because we're about 20 minutes over the actual time.
People
So
are
please
enjoying
don't feel obligated to stay. But no, I'm happy to, but don't feel obligated.
I'll make it simple. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that one of our Ikarei Emunah, just for the sake of argument, was that God was not omniscient.
Yes.
God does not know everything.
Yes.
In that case, will it clash with the point that a man has a full free will, a person has a full free will? I mean, there won't be any clash anymore.
No, there won't be a clash, correct.
So, like, for an atheist, for example, it's much easier to feel like a free will than a religious person.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, no, because they seem so convinced by the scientific argument for determinism that they just go with that one instead.
Well,
As in, I hear much more.
Time justifying why people have to convict of crimes because the drinking made them do it. So.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, I genuinely, if you think about it, you maybe don't mix in circles where people do worry about such kind of abstract things, but if you do, the thing you always hear is, oh gosh, what? But neuroscience, all that. I never ever heard someone, oh wow, but if God knows, as in existentially to us, I don't think anyone worries about the God one as ruling out free will. Whether they should do is a different question, but nobody does. But people really do worry about the causal one, right? So, which is just interesting. I don't know why that is, but it almost pushes the other way, which is, I think, the challenges to free will and the people who say they don't believe in it. I don't know how anyone can actually function with that belief, but people who say they don't, they're all pretty much, coming from a scientific perspective and saying so. Just empirically seems to be the case, which is interesting because you're right. Maybe you would expect it to be, but actually it's the other way around. Most religious people believe they have free will, certainly Jews, and most people who question free will are coming from a completely scientific secular perspective.
But then the problem is that they need to have some sort of morals, and then morals, of course, doesn't exist in that case. And what do they do?
So then you have a problem with that's exactly right.
Because so many religious people probably act kind of what you're saying, which I honestly don't think is such a kfira, whatever, which is like when you.
The God not being omniscient is you can find plenty of evidence in Tanakh for that. It's the truth. Vayinachem Hashem. Why is he regretting? If he knows what was going to happen, he shouldn't regret anything.
Like
there's plenty of.
I feel like modern biblical, at least in Israel, modern Tanakh view is that, like, especially with Nevuah as well, it's not something predetermined. It's like it has to be this time, but it could. Plenty of examples now of like they're understanding like safer than you.
Right.
It's not like it.
Talk about a specific, right?
Yeah.
Look, the truth is that the idea of God as omniscient, right, in the sense of knows everything, knows the future, all of that, is something that only becomes explicit as a philosophical construction from the kind of Greek thought, rather than being taught a priori, kind of in the Tanakh as right. You should know this. God knows everything. It doesn't actually come from pshat, right? So, which doesn't mean it didn't become a principle that people absolutely wedded to, and that's maybe why Rynhold felt that he could, go that route. I don't know. I can't speak for, obviously.
But it's interesting that the people, like you said, if you see, it's hard for me to imagine that you have the entire Jewish tradition, and then suddenly the Greeks come and give us a philosophical principle that we just totally didn't think of or didn't believe in. That
right.
To me doesn't. It
So
doesn't strike,
that
you don't have rabbis. It doesn't strike you as very credible.
Right. Well, so that's kind of whether it's implicit, explicit, and how it becomes so. That's also a whole big question.
Right, I'm saying, but in general, it's hard to imagine that. No Jewish thinker ever thought about this. Not Yeshiva, not Ezra.
Right.
And all of a sudden comes Aristotle and says, "Oh, this has to be the way." And says, "Oh, maybe he's right."
Right.
And and we never have anything to say about this. That to me isn't just
right. I mean, it does seem historically, though, as if we did come to at least formulate it in this kind of terminology later.
But then,
doesn't mean it wasn't implicit.
Right, the problem is you give the Torah Shabbat Peh, which by definition
is exactly. So who knows on that? But that's neither here nor there on the big question of the consistency or otherwise of these views.
It still doesn't the two ways to the Messiah argue for free will, because it could happen if we're all righteous or if we're all wicked. So if both possibilities are out there, then doesn't that argue for free will to put us on a path that we choose to go down? It'll still happen because God is telling us this is what's going to happen, but how we get there is up to us.
Yeah, maybe. Or it could just be that no, one of them's going to happen, and it's just we don't know which, and so it's
right.
it's
So we don't know
again
how we get there. Is kind of our truth.
It's interesting. If you look at the Gemaras and Midrash, does it seem to go either way? There are Gemaras, for example, which say that God does something because something will happen in the future.
Yeah.
There's a Midrash, for example, which says that Avram Avinu was saved from the fire furnace because
of Yaakov
was going to come out of him. In the schus of Yaakov, which is a very interesting statement because Yaakov didn't exist yet, and of course, if Avram Avinu would die, then Yaakov wouldn't help him.
Yeah.
And the strangest part there is not, so the Ralbag would tell you, well, what it means is
taking Midrashim a little, potentially too literally.
Well, they have to mean something, right?
No, they do. But they do. The problem is that as we know, we have plenty of contradictory midrashim.
Right,
that's
the
where.
thing. No, I just give an example. So let's say Ralbag would try to understand that Midrash as saying that since God saw the possibility of Yaakov coming out, therefore it's worthwhile to preserve it. That's what he would explain it probably. Right, the problem says in the schus, I think Midrash says in the schus of Yaakov. But if you say it like that, then of course you can say it because it's if you're talking something which already happened. Right,
Ralbag would have. I mean, I have to say, one of the most interesting things you could do is study Ralbag's Perush on the Torah, right? Because in terms of how on earth he actually does, deal with the actual text itself, given these theories, is fascinating.
Well, there's not a lot of thread there.
There's not yet, but it's a lot of.
I'm a big fan of thread, so.
Yeah. But no, it's really interesting. It was the dean before me, David Berger, was once kind of. No, but he once was at kind of Minyan, and somebody was like, there was a Ralbag he was looking at, and they said, "Oh, that's kind of, why are you looking at that? He's so boring." And he's like, "How can you say that's boring? This is a guy who doesn't think God knows what's going on, writing a Perush on the Torah. That's going to be fascinating. How can that be boring?"
Point of view.
Yeah. I will tell you the story. Cute. My second cousin. My first cousin's son. What's that? I don't know how it works. Removed that. Right. So he loves science, and he watched a scientific documentary the night before with my cousin, with his dad, and it was about the multiverse, right? And the next one, he got to school late, and he missed davening. And the teacher said, "Well, did you done put on tefillin?" And he said, "Well, I watched a documentary last night, and in some version of the world, I have, so why does it matter?" And I thought, what a genius. This kid's a genius, I'm sorry. Like 14 years old. It was quite funny. But so, that was quite amusing. He didn't mean it, obviously, but it was cute.
But the argument itself is actually very strong.
So nowadays, this is a massive topic, massive topic.
Where is a contradiction? I'm still trying to get to what I said at the beginning. For example, we know that God says He cannot take the earth, dirt, all this stuff, right? And then we have Talmud saying that the boy failed, so you cannot, if you don't do this, then you live long, right? So obviously, if God said so He set up rules, right? Like gravity. We know gravity, you should follow gravity, there is no way around, right?
Yeah.
So the same rules if He said here. So obviously, if this thing happens, right, so it doesn't mean that they are set for one person. They are sent for population, they are sent for people.
Yeah.
Right? So if this is so what we're talking about. So again, to me it looks like obvious, so that it is known what will happen because and we see the fulfillment of what
trends.
But it doesn't say that it works for
fine.
for
Yeah.
No.
So it's not a bar. It's Ralbag. He doesn't know what you personally are going to do. It seems to just be pretty close to what the Ralbag says.
Yeah, which is fine.
Oh, okay, so fine, that's okay. Rabbi Grimberg is less sure it's fine. Is the point, right?
It's heretical, basically.
It's non-mainstream. It is definitely. There's no question. It is a very, very controversial. So, 100%. You've said it from a pulpit, but if you taught Rambam's philosophy from the pulpit, you get kicked out. It's a problem.
Also, it could be possible that for individual is known, but not in material sense of knowledge, not in our sense of knowledge.
That's what Rambam saying.
That's what Rambam says, yeah, but the problem with that is, like I say, knowledge, it has to be of what is true. You cannot know what is false. Nothing. It doesn't make sense, right? Definitionally, right? I know that 2 and 2 equals 5. No, you don't. You can't. It's not possible, right? So you know truth, So how God knows, complete mystery. But if you want to make a meaningful statement that God knows, then however he gets it and whatever it's about, the contents have to be true, or the word means nothing at all, which is kind of the Rambam's point, right? Don't even talk about God because you end up in trouble, right? So, but the point is, if you're going to go with actually that he does have knowledge, right? And even if we don't know kind of how and anything about God's knowledge, you have to, if it's a meaningful statement, say, so however he knows and whatever he knows, that I can't tell, but whatever it is truth. And as soon as you have that, you have the problem, right? Only though, like I say you have the problem. You only have the problem if you think free will has to be about all the different possibilities. And that is the thing that actually is the Achilles heel here, because it doesn't work very well as a definition of free will.
I would come back to the human experience. Human experience is that you do have free will. If in some philosophical sense you don't, it makes no difference to you.
That I agree with, but
right?
no, I agree with you on that.
From a religious point of view, right?
Yeah.
We exist as human beings, and our job is to make the choice. Now, let's
Yes.
say that God knows that my choice is already made.
Yeah.
As long as I don't know that, it makes no difference to me.
Okay, that's
And
true, but I
therefore-
don't know. So I think we see
Unless
that
you know
differently
that.
in terms of whether that works as a solution. But for me, it does. But it works only because we need to stop thinking we can define free will in a particular way.
Right. That's so very good. So actually, I think we have defined it. That's what I was trying to go to. We define in a practical sense of something which enables a mitzvah, enables a choice, enables a reward and punishment. In other words, we don't need free will as just an abstract free will which must exist.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, maybe it doesn't exist. We need it, and this is number 3, we need it to enable the concept of reward and punishment. You cannot punish me
correct.
if I have
Correct,
no free will.
correct,
If I have free
yes,
will,
yes.
even if it's in
Yeah,
some
it's a presupposition
some
of
intelligence
100%.
not
That's
true,
true.
right?
That's true.
Then
yes.
that's good enough. And I think that will be. I think that,
It's good enough. No, it's good enough in terms of, because you're saying, therefore, kind of, so it's working backwards, which is to
Right,
say,
exactly.
if there's such a thing as this, then there must be such a thing as free will, even if I can't define it. That's fine.
right,
I don't think it differs.
But for our purposes, right?
Yeah.
Again, why are we interested in this question, right?
Yeah.
We're not pure. I mean, you are pure philosopher. We're not pure philosophers.
No, absolutely.
We're interested
Yeah.
in this because we don't know.
Because
well,
of
God has free will,
100%.
and why am I being punished?
That's why it
if he knows
matters.
everything, so on.
Correct. That
And
is
that's
why
the
it
answer.
matters. Yeah, but it still doesn't get us anywhere near a definition of what free will is. So it comes to the same thing.
Then we can always go back to the Rambam.
Right, then we can, right, well, his definition actually, if you want to really do the kind of close reading, is very interesting, because he doesn't mention anywhere alternate possibilities. He just says, if you want to do the good, and if you want
to.
in
That's
Rutsa,
exactly
but you
good.
could Rutsa because you're determined to Rutsa, and it still would be true. As in his view of free will, might not be the alternate possibilities one. It might be the other version, which is I do what I desire.
But again, that fits in very nicely with the moral framework.
This is the Rambam in terms of what he puts there in Mishnah Torah.
Right, but
Right.
then on the guide, volume 3, chapter 17,
Mm-hmm.
then you have full free will. And
Oh, no. So you have free will, but why can't free will be defined this way?
Yeah, if you
That's
look,
all I
that's
mean. Yeah,
Rambam.
right.
He doesn't
You
say-
have free will
Right.
for the Rambam, for sure. The question is, how's he defining it? Is he defining it as alternate possibilities, or is he defining it as an absence of compulsion, which is like me in the candy store? I genuinely don't think I have a choice in that candy store, but I still think I'm acting freely in acting on my own character.
Right, that's a very good dig in the Rambam, because he doesn't say
And
"Nihita atzmo l'derech Torah," he says
Yeah.
"Imuratzah."
Correct.
That's
And
I
that, so I
think-
think that it's not at all clear that the Rambam actually thinks alternate possibilities are as important as many of
And
us
if you,
do.
right,
because of
and
this,
if he'll tell you the reason why it's not important is because, again, it's a question of being righteous or evil, not whether you have free will. No, you can do something else. Right? Because at the end of the day, it's a moral problem.
Yeah, it's, or at least free will is necessary for moral reasons. There's no question. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. And that is Kant, right? Kant also posits it for that reason. He says you can't. Theoretically, there's no way in the realm of science to account for free will, but in the realm of morality, that's our contact with these other, things that can't be understood that way.
I think we have a good resolution.
Yeah.
It's a good resolution.
Yeah, it's not about the answers, it's about the journey.
I heard about next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, problem of evil. Another unanswerable.